I can change the world with my asthma, one person at a time. That's all that matters. Something good has come from these tiny fish lungs.
Hey everyone, I'm Dylan. Welcome to Affirmitivity. On this episode, I'm talking with Tiffany Rae Mallari. I know her as Tiff. If you follow her on TikTok, you probably know her as Tifa. She is a professional dancer and has been all of her life. She's also dealt with depression all of her life, which has only been exacerbated by the pandemic and the lockdown, and she has turned to dance to help deal with her depression. She has one of the best analogies for dealing with depression for people who don't deal with depression, so they can understand what it's like to deal with depression. She explains it a lot better than I do. She is also the inspiration behind this entire project and one of my favorite humans. I only kind of know you casually through a show that we did together. I don't know any sort of history you might have with depression or anything like that. I just know that you posted something to Instagram that was the spark to actually get me to do this. I've been thinking about doing this for a while.
Yeah.
And there was something about what you posted that just made me go, I can't keep sitting on this anymore. But so thank you for
You're welcome.
lighting whatever fire under my ass it took to do this. But I'm completely crediting you for doing it.
Oh, thanks.
And again, it was nothing dramatic or overwhelming. Like I didn't think you were in sort of like any sort of like danger of harming yourself. Or anything. It was just a I don't know what to do kind of post, or how is everybody else coping with this kind of post. So again, I don't know if you have a history with it or not, or if it was just everything going on with the pandemic and things being closed down. But what you expressed, I just at least wanted to see if you were willing to talk about, and you are, because here you are.
Yeah.
So kind of tell me like your story, like your background, where you've come from. You're obviously a performer, how you got into that, and then just how this has kind of like led you to this moment, to like that, to that post, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm Filipino, like full Filipino. So coming already from like in that like Asian culture, I know growing up, I've always had really super supportive parents. Even me and my sister are both dancers, professional dancers. So for us to go into the arts as a career, we got really lucky with the Asian parents that we got that are like super supportive in that. But I did see a lot of my peers and some of my family members like go through harder times, and that type of like addressing mental health wasn't really, in the forefront. That wasn't like part of anything. It was just like, what, like you just think positively, or just don't think like that. And that was like the solution. I have always kind of had a little bit of like anxiety and a little bit of fear, but just innately, I'm actually like a really shy person. So I do kind of have this like irrational fear a little bit of like people in the world. Just that as a performer, as I grew up doing dance, that was the only thing that like that never even crossed my mind when I was dancing. Like that was my saving grace, was dance and performing. Even as like the shyest kid, like painfully shy kid, dance was like the stage was a whole other world to me, and I can't even quite justify or grasp why that is. It's almost like I felt more at home, like comfortable.
Right. No, I
being
get
that exposed. I don't know.
I totally get that. Well, I don't even know if it's like being that exposed. I mean, maybe it is for you, but it's also kind of that thing of, um, yeah, it seems weird that somebody who can be introverted and shy would want to get up in front of a bunch of other people and something like that. But I think it's also too, you're kind of disappearing into that world of like, you can disappear into a dance, you can disappear into a
Yeah.
show. I'm so clearly not a dancer, but in playing a role, you can
live that other reality for a while and disappear into that. So it doesn't matter if there, you know, 20 or 200 or 2,000 people watching you. You're
Yeah.
not dealing with all your other stuff. It's a way of
Yeah.
coping or escaping or something like that, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I mean, that's honestly the big part I think that I miss and a lot of artists miss is that kind of special escape that we can't do now,
Yeah.
even as like an introvert, so many people like think, oh, it must be so easy for you, stay at home. It's like, no, introverts I want the choice to say
Right.
no to an outside situation. Like now everyone's inside and I don't have a
Yeah.
space
Because
or a
there are
safe
times when you do
space.
want to go outside.
Yeah.
You want to be able to feel like you can self isolate. And when
Yeah.
you're kind of like forced into it, it's like that's now been taken away from you.
Yes,
So that
exactly.
part of your identity is now gone.
Yeah.
So even though you are still an introvert, it doesn't become like a part of who you are. It's now being forced upon you.
Yes. Yeah. The definition is totally flipped
Yeah.
on it. I think being a dancer and having that type of career is pretty like unstable and can be anxiety inducing. And I've had moments where it just was like overwhelming, but dance or like working towards it, even when there was like low lows or nothing was happening for years, there was still that like little seed, like I'm just going to keep going because eventually something will happen, or there was always something to work towards.
Right.
And during the during quarantine and during the pandemic, it just, there's nothing to work towards, especially when the world has announced, hey, live everything is shut down and who knows when it'll come
Who knows
back. You're
when?
like, wait, I have now just become irrelevant, or like everything I've trained for is just like taken away from you. And even if, the hard thing too about doing your passion as your work, people are like, well, just dance every day, it makes you happy. And I was like, but it's so different than like you doing Sudoku to ease your mind. Like this is also what I did as my career. And so
Yeah.
separating that in your mind is like really hard. And it makes you have like this strange relationship with this thing that you love.
Right.
You like can't go, I couldn't turn to it for a long time because it was like what was hurting me kind of, or at least that's what I had connected in my brain. Like
Uh-huh.
dance hurt me because, it's gone now, but it wasn't. Dance isn't the thing that hurt me. I had to like figure that out. But I've always had those little anxiety and fears, and I've found different ways to navigate life and my career with it. And during the pandemic, it felt near impossible to do. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm trying everything and it really doesn't change. It doesn't change anything else.
Right. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize again too. While it's odd for, an introvert to want to be in front of people, and yes, you are disappearing into your own world, there's that shared experience connection you get with an audience. So wherever people are coming from, whenever they come to see a show or whatever, it doesn't matter where they're from. They're now in this one space. We're all going to share this one experience, and there's that unity of it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of and there's something about being able to express that either through dance or song or acting or whatever, to be able to help create that experience. You're not just creating this reality, you're creating this shared experience for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And to now not share that experience with other people, it's not like, well, you can just dance, if that makes you happy. It's like, yeah, it can be kind of a relief, but there isn't that satisfaction. You don't have that connection anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, even though you're posting stuff just to keep yourself loose and, just expressive, and you're posting it
Yeah.
online, yes, people are seeing it and yes, people can connect. But again, with social media, it's like you don't have that immediate connection with
Yeah.
whoever's watching. You don't know who's watching, and whoever's watching could be like, oh, yeah, it's another post. Swipe,
Yeah.
like skip through your story, or just like, yep, I see it in the feed, and they could watch the whole thing. It could be 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I watch the whole thing.
Thanks.
It's so it's just so much fun watching it too, especially in
Oh, thanks.
your big coat,
In my big fuzzy bear
your
coat.
big fuzzy bear coat.
Thanks. That is totally what we do that is so special is that which is so different than like movie actors or TV actors who are like bits and pieces and time is like jumbled for them.
Right.
For us, we're so very present. Everything is happening right now all together, and whatever happens happens, and whatever will be kind of thing. It's like a, it sounds so hippy dippy, but when you put it that way, it is kind of this really spiritual thing that happens
Yeah.
because it's almost like, fate brought all those people together. Whatever happens, happens. All the feelings, if someone falls off stage, I mean, that's just what was going to happen that day. And these are the specific people that experience that one thing all together. And it's just like a finite group of people too,
Yeah.
experiencing that one thing. And it makes it that much more special. Yeah, and not being able to share with each other. I mean, even when you're an introvert, we're still we're like tribal human beings. We're like a community, like that we can't live by ourselves. I mean, there are some people who can,
Who
but
can? Yeah.
that's not me.
Right.
I can't do it.
Yeah, it is that weird kind of duality of, feeling need to be alone, but also still feeling need to have that connection with other people.
What do you do? Like, I know now I'm just starting to open up to the like fact of like, TikTok, which is like so out of my generation. And I was like,
Well, please,
how do these
out of
people
yours, out of mine.
do? Oh my gosh. But like what do you guys do? Like what does an actor or like a singer do?
I've been fortunate enough that I was already involved with a group of people. We were doing like kind of like live variety shows. And the last live one we did was actually on Leap Day of 2020.
Oh, wow.
And then everything shut down. And we've been doing them online
Wow.
via Zoom and then broadcasting through YouTube. We have our own channel on YouTube and everything like that now. So we do have that. And we do get, and there's kind of that interaction because we're doing it on YouTube. The chat is open so people can
Yeah.
comment or they put their little applause emojis or
Yeah.
whatever. So I have a couple of those shows. I do an improv show every Friday and I do this variety show on Saturdays. So there is that. At least I have that.
Yeah.
And I know there are a lot of other actors who are getting together and doing like readings of things. But that's, again, it keeps the creative juice flowing and it keeps, the rust from settling in. It's still not quite the same.
It's like Zoom birthday parties or Zoom happy hour, and you're like excited. You're like, oh, we're gonna see, but it's just this like stark reminder that you're not
Right.
together in a room. You're like, is this actually making it worse? Do I actually feel worse doing this?
There is that sense of just like, not even just as a performer, just like as a person though. Like you see someone that you love and care about and you're so
Yeah.
excited to see them, you know, you can't hug them.
Yeah.
There's Which is another thing that I find interesting for artists and introverts. As introverted as we are, we're also very touchy feely.
Yeah, we're very affectionate.
Like again, we did that show, and I only did that show once a week. I was the fill-in guy. I was the relief guy once a week for that one summer. As the last time I saw you in person.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Wow, that's so crazy.
I know. But if it weren't for this, I would love to see you and just like give you the biggest hug.
I know. I would just be like, oh my gosh. Oh,
So yeah, so there's that element of it that's missing through all this. So what sort of response did you get? Like, I mean, I know I replied, and I'm sure a couple other people replied, but like, what sort of like from that post that you made, like, because it was something about how you'd said, I should even look it up. Here it is. Yeah, it's the My Fellow Artists. I know I'm not the only one experiencing pandemic depression. I have found that I can keep the sadness at bay for roughly a week before the heavy emptiness of hopelessness consumes me. I know I need to practice patience and grace for myself. I spiral because I feel so much shame and guilt for feeling the way I feel. Ultimately, I just need to take a bath, put on my comfy pajamas, crawl into bed, and turn on Spirited Away. What helps you when you start feeling heavy?
So many people responded. It was
Yeah.
like amazing. And I got so many like DMs and like personal messages and people, texting being like, "Oh my gosh, I feel the same way," or just yesterday I hit my, week limit and just had a breakdown and cried in the bathtub, and but today is better. Or other people are like, "Oh, today's a good day and this is what helped me." And so it just started like a conversation between a bunch of people where you just don't feel alone. And ultimately there, I don't think there's like tools that we can kind of have
Right.
to like help us, but there's not like a big old solution. And what I'm finding is what helps the most, which is I think why you're also doing this, is just knowing you're not alone. Like it sounds so cliche because that's a phrase that's always used, but when you know people that you know that also go through it, not
Right.
just knowing in general, there are like how many billions of people, of course some of them has to feel the same, you're not like a
Yeah.
special snowflake, but knowing the people that you know that you also see every day on your feed and are going through that too behind the scenes. I don't know, it feels okay, and it probably goes back to that type of connection that humans need to have, that type of shared experience,
Right.
and even though we're
Yeah.
all going through this pandemic, we're doing it so isolated that sometimes it is hard for your brain to wrap around that this is a totally shared experience with
Right.
other people.
Yeah. And it's, well, yeah, it's that general sense of, yeah, you're not alone. Okay. You know, there's other people out there. But until you like do like what you did and reach out and say
Hmm.
something,
Hmm.
it puts a face on it or several faces on it, in our case, where you see other people who, and I think that's also something even still with social media right now is even though we all know we're going through just this dumpster fire of a time, everybody's still putting on their best faces. And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm okay. It's, and good. I'm glad you're doing okay. But it's that snapshot that as you're scrolling through it, you see, yeah, everybody seems to be doing fine but me. And
Yeah.
until you actually, and well, that's not statistically possible until like you do what you did and reach out and say, anybody else going through this, you get everybody going, oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying something. And then actually reaching out and talking about it. That it also, I think, opens up that community of that extra like line of communication. Like somebody you might not have talked to about this before, like you and I. We
Yeah.
might not have talked about this before had you not, we probably wouldn't have. Again, we know each
Yeah.
other so casually outside of this
Yeah.
that what would have made you think to, you know what, I should reach out to Dylan and talk to Dylan. But now you have other people that you can talk to, but even like more beyond like your fiance, because I'm sure you talk to him.
Hmm.
But knowing you have these other friends that are experiencing the same thing you do too, that you can now just go, I don't feel so vulnerable or I don't feel so exposed. I don't know what the word is. Um, but you feel safer now talking to somebody that you know
Hmm.
going through this. And I think I that might have been also too kind of like what it was about your post that like got me rolling on this was it was that reach out to other people that you know and having that conversation, which is exactly all I'm thinking of this, being right now
Yeah.
is just having the conversation.
Yeah. It's so nice because I mean, I forget this myself, but I think this is just something we do as humans. Like when we're in trouble, we are like what I wrote, like there's some sort of like shame or guilt of being like, why do I feel like this? Like
I wanted
everyone
to touch on that with you
is
too. Yeah.
going through this, but so I don't reach out for help, but I always forget the other side to reaching out for help is like what you were saying with communication. Me reaching out for help allows other people to reach out for help. It's
Exactly.
not just like me on in a spotlight being like, I'm helpless, it's actually, it just opens up a
Right.
bigger room for
Yeah, it
other
allows
people.
other people to say, yes, I need help too. And like who you're opening up to. They
Yeah.
have been sitting there going, I wish I had someone to talk to.
Hmm.
And they don't necessarily need someone who's doing fine.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes, exactly.
you want to be heard. You want to know that what you're going through isn't as isolating and as awful
Hmm.
as it feels and as your brain is telling you it is.
Yeah.
It's that moment of somebody else just going, "Oh, thank God, yes, I feel
Yeah.
this."
Yep.
Now you have something, and in that respect, you can talk about it more openly because you have a same frame of reference, the same kind of language, as opposed to someone who doesn't get it.
Yeah. Who doesn't get it? It's honestly just validation in being like,
Yeah,
okay, I'm not like just making it up in my head. I
right,
don't know why we tell ourselves that, but because you're trying to talk yourself out of wherever you are,
right.
that kind of voice comes in and you're like, well, is this just something I just made it up and I'm struggling? And then when someone says, no, I'm struggling, you're like, oh my gosh. So this is a real thing. And then
Yeah.
then you can actually move forward when it's like a real, but when you're like struggling and drowning in it and you don't even know what's real and there's no way to like,
And you mentioned the guilt too, and I think that could be where some of it comes in
yeah.
because you look at it and like overall, comparatively speaking, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
You know, you just got engaged. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You've got a place to live, you've got food on the table, and you know, all things considered,
Yeah.
you know, you're doing all right, but you just still have that sense of whatever it is, and you have that guilt feeling. It's like, why do I feel so bad when I kind of have it pretty good?
Yeah. I think also what was like really, really hard for me and a lot of my castmates. So I was in Rock of Ages Hollywood
Right.
when the pandemic hit, and our one of our leads and my sweet friend Nick Cordero was the Broadway actor who
Yeah.
died of coronavirus. And it's for that first big chunk of the pandemic, our whole lives were consumed with him, and then he passed away, and then our lives were consumed with this like strange reality of our friend, and we couldn't be together, and no, you know what I mean, like what a
Yeah.
weird thing to go through.
Yeah,
And
that'd be
then
the
that
kind of thing that
fed.
would get you all together to
Yes.
hug and cry and
Yeah.
reminisce.
Yeah, and we did it on Zoom, which made it even like more heartbreaking. We're just like, we can't even hold each other, and have this shared sorrow. And of course that fed the guilt where, a lot of us were struggling and we were trying to use him, keep him in my, oh, I'm even wearing his like shirt, live your life was his like motto.
Uh-huh.
Um, we were trying to like keep it positive for in honoring him, you know what I mean? And then that's where you felt guilt, or at least that's where I felt guilty in being like, wow, I'm alive and I don't even have coronavirus and I don't, but I'm struggling and I feel bad. And why can't I just like get up and dance and skip and hike, and when I can barely even remember what my body used to do,
Right.
and then it just like spirals and it feeds and it feeds and it feeds. And honestly, don't even know how I got out of it. It's just you find the little window. You find
Right.
like a little moment and you're like, I'm just gonna run through that little light and see how far I get, and then go a little bit more every day, a little
A
bit
little bit
more
more.
every
Yeah. And good that you took that window because, some people might not. You don't
day. I
know.
know some people don't, and it's hard.
Yeah. And then you spiral deeper and deeper and deeper. And then,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
Sometimes you just need someone sitting at the bottom of the well with you, and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, well, this is where we're at. And then one day you'll just be like, okay, I don't want to be down here anymore.
Yeah. And you start climbing out.
Yeah, you start climbing out little by little. It's a
And it's
weird.
funny to just using that as like a mental image. just that climbing out. It's like some days you actually feel like you're out. And then the next day you're like, how did I get halfway back down the thing
Yeah,
again? I
you're like,
don't
yeah.
like
Well,
overnight.
wait a
I woke
second.
up and suddenly I'm back down to the yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's also like having for I used to be so scared of that to the point where it didn't matter if I got out, I would pull myself right back in because I was like waiting for myself to like slide back, and just like go back down into that dark, sad place. And it was because I wasn't being patient with myself, like what I wrote in my post, and I wasn't having I mean, I had no patience with myself and I had no grace and I had no forgiveness. And even if it's just a little bit, that helps knowing like, okay, you might wake up back down at the bottom of the well, and that's okay. You have to tell yourself that's okay, and that's it. No
Yeah.
justification that and no pushing and no being like, gosh, you weren't able to do it again, like that negative like
Right.
inner voice instead. And I don't necessarily, I'm not a person who really likes like a cheerleader cheering me on in real life. So
Right.
I wouldn't really say that to myself, but as long as I validate myself and say like, it's okay,
Yeah.
then I was like, oh yeah, I guess, I mean, it is what it is, and then we continue onward.
Yeah. It's okay not to be okay for a while.
Yeah.
And you know you're gonna be okay. And yeah, you
Mhm.
do that, you can do that kind of like preemptive uh depressive dive where it's like I
Yeah.
know I'm going to be there eventually anyway, or when you feel like up and happy you can just eventually go, I'm going to slide back down there anyway, and
Yeah.
just that thought is enough to make you go, I'm going to be depressed, and that makes me depressed, and
Yeah.
that already that takes you down.
Starts to take you down. Yeah. Starts to weigh
There's,
you.
yeah, there is something so easy about that pull. Like it feels, especially when you're depressed, like everything
Yeah.
exhausts emotion, just
Yeah.
emotionally exhausts you. That the
Yeah.
idea of staying in a positive place is exhausting, both mentally and physically. That it's just easier to sit on the couch and go, bleh.
Yeah. And just like hope you become the couch one day, and then you're much happier because you're a couch, you know? You
Yeah.
don't have to do
And
anything.
see, I'm a couch. I can provide comfort to other people, and that'll be good.
Yeah. And I
And then
gotta watch
eventually everybody
TV.
becomes the couch.
It's just this like all consuming
It's
couch
the
that absorbs
consuming
people.
black hole of a couch.
Oh no. I will not be a couch, even though I kind of look like one.
You're a pollster. That's kind of the weird thing about this pandemic and the fact that we're locked down, the fact that we have to stay at home. I think there's something, a silver lining to it, as it were, that when you are feeling that down, like in our regular lives, you're feeling that crappy and whatever, but you know you got to get up and go do stuff. You got to go to your job or go to a show or just go to the
Yeah.
store to get stuff. You got to get yourself up and go. Here now, those opportunities don't exist. And so, one,
Yeah.
it's easier to be in that place longer, but it also gives you the time to be in that place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As opposed to, I feel like crap, but I've got to get up and go do this.
Yeah.
So now
Yeah.
there's that dangerous line of I can stay here and I can feel this. And it's that line of, well, how long do I feel this? Do I let myself just completely sink into it? Or it's like, okay, I can accept it for however long it needs to last and then start to work my way out of it. But I mean, that's something I try to tell myself sometimes too. It's like it's so easy to when you're I don't even think just with people who are feeling depression and anxiety to have that feeling of even when you're feeling good, it's like you say it's like, well, I'm going to feel depressed again eventually anyway. Or it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
you're waiting for that thing to knock you out of your positive headspace. The flip of that is true too. You're in that negative space, something's going to bring you out of that. But it's so much easier to, for some reason, for us as just human beings, to think, I feel great, it's not going to last.
Yeah.
And then when you don't feel great, this is forever.
Yeah.
As opposed to when you don't feel
The
great, to
other.
go, this isn't going to last either.
Yeah.
But it's always going to be. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's up to you and sometimes it's not. Something can pull you out of it or you can pull yourself or
Yeah. I always thought I was pretty good at, like, my inner voice was pretty good,
Mhm.
even when I wasn't feeling so great, or if I was having anxiety or fear. And like what you were saying, like, but then you have to rally, you have to put on your big girl pants and then
Right.
go to work. And then after that, you're like, wow, I feel way better. Like right before this, I felt kind of like, nah, and now I'm just glad I did something or whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but this time did a lot us like a stark realization, or at least for me, my inner voice, when she just can run rampant, she's not that great
No,
sometimes. And I'm like, oh,
you're
I
gonna get the
thought
great
you
out.
were way better than that.
Yeah, because now you have the time to
You're not.
listen to it. To like
Yeah.
really listen to it.
Yeah. And you can only practice what you learn when you're like given an actual moment. And I've never had to actually practice talking myself out of myself. you know
Right.
i've I don't think I've like avoided things, but I've just had other like tools and other things that were accessible that I depended on. And so that never was practiced really, like not to its full extent,
Right.
you know? And that's not something you like train when you're growing up. I mean, it probably should
It
be,
should be.
you
Yeah,
know,
it should be.
it totally should be, but it's not. And we like train every other part of us, and we should train that. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh wow. I
And
was like, I do yoga, and I know how to breathe in and out and think positively, and I know everything doesn't last forever, but I never really had to practice it
yeah.
until
Yeah. You never had to like
pandemic. And I was like, oh wow, I'm
yeah,
not as advanced as I thought.
yeah, you don't get to stretch that muscle, as it were.
Yeah.
This thing too, it's different than like so yeah, train your brain. It's like, well, that's one thing. This is training your mind. This is a
Hmm.
mindset thing. And again, I think there's also that misconception too that's like it's no different than like working out. Like you don't just like work out a few times, you're in shape, and now you're in shape.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
you got to continuously work on it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something about that before that made me think of this too, but I can't remember what it was. But now that it's coming up again, that it never. You're saying like there are tools, you have tools, but there's never that just that one thing. That's what it was. There's never that
Mhm.
one thing that makes it work. Like there'll be one thing that makes it work this time. It'll be something else the next time. There's always whatever the tools there are for whatever situation. But I think that's one thing a lot of people don't get. Even people who are depressed that don't get. They want to find that thing. They want to find that magic diet pill that's going to make you lose 30 pounds and you're like that forever. You want to find that one magic pill that's just going to make you feel good, that you don't feel depressed all the time. And where all there are, pills that help with that, you know, um, even still, I've been on medication. I know people are on medication, whatever. It just helps keep them out of the darkest places, that they
Mhm.
still fight with it.
Mhm.
Like, no matter, it doesn't go away. And you always kind of, which sounds kind of depressing to say, that's it's always going to be there.
It's always good.
But it's learning to manage it and learning to live with it and knowing how to
Mhm.
work with it. And yeah, it can get better. But I think also too with like say like an alcoholic, what happens when they fall off the wagon and they start drinking again? What happens when you just let your negative thoughts take over again? It's something you constantly have to work on.
Yeah.
Nothing. It's not just going to be one day you're happy and now you're always happy.
It's hard too to not like absorb everything around, like of course now we also have time to like watch the news and read the things, and Facebook. Everybody has time for Facebook now. You're like, oh my gosh, it was already bad before. See, it's even worse. And it's, I mean, that goes along with, having, um, doing the work of like being able to see the world around you and not maybe absorb everything. Everything doesn't have to be like a
Right.
personal thing that you take onto your back, because that's literally impossible. But when you're depressed and you're sad, everything feeds that. It's like this all-consuming thing, and you're like, what? I don't even usually eat that thing. Why is it in me?
Right.
And so it's I have, even my fiance, who's like the most optimistic human being, which has also been hard because he's just like positive and go, go, go all the time. And I was like, I'm going crazy. Um, he even was saying he can start to feel it too, especially with politics and what's happening, in our world and in our community and in our country. There is a point where you do have to be like, okay, now I'm going to just put it away and just be quiet. And ultimately, right at this moment, it's, there's nothing I can do about it. And it's only making me worse and only making me unhealthy. And I need to just like step away, go take care of myself, because I mean, we're by ourselves anyways. You might as well put yourself first. And then when you're ready to go, you can go back and help the world, But if you're like helpless, there's no good you can do. It only comes out bad.
Yeah.
And you can see that too. There are some people who are not healthy who are like putting it out there into the ethernet, and you're like, oh, is this, I don't know. Like, is
I,
this
I think
okay?
you hit the nail right on the head there. I think there's a lot of it comes from that sense of helplessness and that there's nothing you can do about it. And there's that frustration. You want to do something about it, but it's so far beyond you or out of your realm, either geographically or whatever, you can't do anything about it. And you feel helpless because of that. And that feeds your,
Yes.
you know, that you, yeah, I think you're right. You do need to get into that place where you put it away, you feel better about yourself because a lot of what you see out there is just this quick knee jerk emotional reaction as opposed to like
Mhm.
just some reasoned, you know, self reflection.
Yeah.
You'll have, even then it could be like you can put something out there and whatever response you get or whatever can immediately like trigger that, but you can't control someone else's response.
Yeah.
Even like, no, this is what I'm saying, or you're missing the point, or
Yeah.
whatever, it then can beat you back down into there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
So then it comes down to you have to figure out what you can do. And I
Yeah.
think that's different for everybody too. It's like what can you do? And it's not even necessarily what can you do directly to affect what's going on. What can you do in your own world to help you
Mhm.
better and the people around you better?
Mhm.
And there's no reason that can't have like that ripple effect.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like wow, that would take so long, but
But not if everyone did it in their own
exactly.
continual circles, then
That was what I want to ask you too, because you mentioned how your fiance is, so positive or everything like that,
yeah.
and you fight with that voice in your head or whatever. How do you two communicate about that?
Oh man. Um, it took a while actually. In the beginning he was trying to like counteract by being the positive one,
Right.
being the hopeful one. And then that was like slowly feeding, like I felt like the more he was positive, the worse I was getting, the deeper it was going. And we kind of had a talk where I was like, hey, this isn't, I don't know, it was like feeding that guilt part where I was like, why can't I just be positive?
Yeah.
Just
Why can't
think
you be? Why can't you be as
positively.
happy as he's trying to
Yeah.
be to be happy? And then
Yeah.
you feel that guilt, and it
You
drags you
feel
down
guilt. Y-
further.
Yeah. And you feel like not ill-equipped, but you feel almost like you don't function
Yeah, you
properly.
feel inadequate. There's something wrong with you that you can't.
Yeah, I'm like, well, am I broken? Oh my gosh, like I've forgotten how to human almost. It's like I don't even human well. Great. And then you spiral and you're like, I'm pointless, I'm irrelevant. And so, we had a talk where I was like, I know that this is your response out of love. And when you see someone helpless, you want to help them. And one of my, actually, he said, one of the examples I gave him. So I have asthma. Well, I think you know this. Don't you know this?
Oh, from when we were doing
Like,
the
did
show.
I have when we were doing the show? Yeah. I
Yeah.
have I have asthma and I like pretty much keep it contained. But if I happen to have like an asthma attack, especially in the shows, there's nothing anyone can do. And I have to tell people that. I have to be like, the only thing really you could help with is if someone brought me a small cup of warm water and made sure I had my inhaler in my hand. But other than that, there's nothing you can do when someone's having an asthma attack. I have to just get out of it myself.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's okay. As long as I don't feel like people are watching me and then I feel guilty for not being able to do something that even a fish could do
Right.
underwater, which is breathe, and that was one of the things too. I was like, please don't tell me, just breathe. Because if I could, I would. Like, don't tell me that.
That's,
Just
that is
step away.
that is and that's exactly what that is too. It's like, you're having
Yes.
an asthma attack and you can't breathe. Well,
Yeah.
just breathe.
Just
It's
breathe.
like
And I'm like,
when you're feeling that, like, depression or whatever, it's like, well, just
just
cheer up,
don't.
just be happy.
Yeah. And you're like, oh,
No, it doesn't
ah,
work that way.
yeah.
Oh my God, that is such a great
So
analogy.
I told him that, and he's when we met doing Wicked, the
Okay.
musical, and he saw me have a couple bad attacks in certain cities with high elevation. And he's like, it's hard because for the helper, they kind of have to put their pride aside of wanting to rush in and help in knowing like the best thing for this person that they love is just a safe space, basically, and let them do it and almost like have faith in them that they can do it. That's really all you need, and then you can do it. However long it takes for me to get out of it, I get out of it, take the little thing, I drink my water, and then I'm like, wow, okay, let's go, and so I kind of gave him that analogy, and he's like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. And that's really hard for someone who doesn't go through depression to do, but it does help. And I
It's
think having that
fantastic.
conversation too helps.
Yeah, that's a fantastic analogy. I love that. And stealing that.
Yeah, take
Um,
it, spread it around the world.
but then what was great though was the fact that you were able to have that conversation. That you can be, like you said, you need that safe space, and that you two have that ability to be that open with each other about what you like. You felt safe enough to be able to say,
Mhm.
I appreciate what you're doing and I know it's done out of love and whatever. It's not your
But it's
fault.
not helping.
Yeah, it's not your fault that it's not helping.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah,
And
that
also for them too, because they feel guilty, and then they start to feel bad, and then
right.
in sometimes that will manifest as like blame on the other person, like, you're making me feel bad, and you're like, what, you're making me feel, and even just saying out loud, whether or not, obviously he does it, but I think for my mentality, I know that was expressed. So now I go into those moments knowing that knowledge is already out there, kind
Mhm.
of. It's like hard when you're in it too, it's hard to explain. Like, you kind
Right.
of have to like be out of it and be like, hey, so now that I've gone back through and I think maybe this doesn't quite work, and let's do that, it's so much trial and error because there isn't, like you said, like there isn't like one solution, and it's not maybe the same solution each time.
Right.
You kind of have to, you just adjust with where it's flowing, but that mentality kind of helps
Yeah.
all parties a little bit.
Yeah. That's great that you have, because now he kind of like speaks your language a little bit.
Hmm. Hmm. Or at least like, yeah, he can at least like translate what's happening,
Right.
even though he's never actually like viscerally understood it. He at least knows as far as he can know.
Right. Like, they're like, people like your fiance can say, they know what it feels like to be sad or disappointed or depressed, but to have that almost kind of like be a core part of your being,
Mm.
you know, is
Mhm.
something they don't get. They have
Yeah.
that positivity as a core part of their being,
Yeah.
you know, which maybe that's what's broken in them.
I know. I was like, maybe you don't human, right?
Maybe we're doing it right and you're doing it wrong.
You're actually having the human experience and you're avoiding it. Just kidding. I don't. Whatever makes us feel better.
But it's so great that you found that moment, because I think a lot of
Yeah.
people can run into that. It's like they don't get it and they
Yeah.
don't know how to express it. But yeah, one the fact that you two have that channel of communication, that openness with between each other is fantastic. And wow, that's the perfect analogy. I love that so much.
Yeah, use it.
Gonna stealing it. I'm gonna
Okay.
I'm gonna use your asthma to my advantage. Thanks.
I can change the world with my asthma, one person at a time. That's all that matters. Oh,
Something
man.
good has come with me not breathing.
Yeah. Something good has come from these tiny fish lungs. Gosh.
Oh, that was amazing. That's fantastic. I can't imagine we're gonna get any better than that. So I'll just wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Tiff, for doing this and being a part of this and being willing to it. And again, thank you so much for being the spark that pushed me over the edge to actually do this too.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I really hope you got something out of this episode. If you like what we're doing, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You know the drill. And if you don't like it, move on. Don't be mean in the comments. That just says more about you than it does about us. I'm sure there are one or two other things on YouTube you control. If you or someone you know is having suicidal thoughts, please, please, please call emergency services, call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Just call someone. You are not alone. You're going to get through this, and the world is a better place with you in it, whether you see it or not.